Hello everyone, my name is Daniela and I'm a volunteer with For a Safer Space. Today's presentation will be on 2SLGBTQ+, history, current issues, and resistance. I would like to begin this presentation with a land acknowledgement. I am conducting this presentation on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island. While it is important to acknowledge which land I'm on, it is equally as important to understand why we engage in a land acknowledgement. First, acknowledging the land is an act of decolonization. Decolonization is an act that aims to reverse colonialism. It is also significant in understanding history and acknowledging history, as well as showing respect for indigenous peoples and their relationship to the land. However, it is important to not only use the land acknowledgement, but to educate ourselves on historical and current issues, stand with indigenous peoples in the pursuit of social justice, and decolonize our thoughts and actions. Next, I would like to provide a content warning. This presentation details history and current issues, topics of violence, conversion therapy, homophobia, transphobia, and mental health, including suicide, will be discussed briefly. Today's agenda will include a brief introduction, followed by impacts of colonization, Stonewall Riots, AIDS crisis, HWO and the 2SLGBTQ+ community, BIPOC erasure, current issues, resilience and resistance, and to conclude, resources and key takeaways will be discussed. Throughout history, the 2SLGBTQ+ community has faced discrimination. Events such as the Stonewall Riots, AIDS crisis, among others, demonstrate the long-standing history and resistance. Progress has been made over time. However, globally, some countries are further behind in acceptance compared to others, much of which is the result of colonization. While progress has been made, there is still a high prevalence of discrimination and oppression. Regardless, 2SLGBTQ+ individuals have shown great resilience and resistance. Impacts of colonization. Queer identities have existed in every documented culture to exist. While there were some that historically prohibited or persecuted queer individuals, other cultures did not hold the same harmful beliefs, as seen with two-spirit identities in indigenous cultures. The impacts of colonialism and colonization when Europeans aimed to take land away from indigenous populations changed the way that these identities were viewed. Europeans struggled with the views that were different from the social norms of what a masculine man and feminine woman were expected to do. Therefore, there were codes put in place to ban queer identities. Today, these beliefs still impact many indigenous communities due to the colonized mindset that was forced onto them. This demonstrates the role colonization played in impacting beliefs as well as spreading homophobia and transphobia. This next section will cover the Stonewall Riots, where we will go over what is the Stonewall Riots, what is its significance, and Stonewall and Pride Month. What is the Stonewall Riots? In New York City during late June in 1969, the Stonewall Riots, also known as the Stonewall Uprising, occurred when police raided the Stonewall Inn, which was a gay club. For decades, queer individuals found themselves at bars as a safe space to be themselves and find community. Often bars were tipped off when police were going to raid them. However, this was not the case this time. This raid resulted in a riot among police, roughly removing employees and guests from the bar who were tired with police harassment and discrimination and decided to not cooperate this time. Following the harassment and violence on June 28, 1969, there were 5 more days of protests and violent interactions with law enforcement outside of the Stonewall Inn. This event would become a major turning point in the gay rights movement within the United States and globally. What is its significance? While Stonewall was not the beginning of the gay rights movement, it was a significant moment in activism, which led to the development of various queer rights organizations such as the Gay Liberation Front or Human Rights Campaign. It created a legacy so much so that on the first anniversary in 1970, thousands of individuals marched through Manhattan from the Stonewall Inn to Central Park. This was then called Christopher Street Liberation Day. However, it was also the first Pride Parade. Stonewall and Pride Month. Given the legacy left behind by the Stonewall Riots and how it trailblazed many 2SLGBTQ+ rights, June has become known as Pride Month. This adds to the significance of this event as Pride Month itself holds importance to the community. While Pride Month is a celebration of rights and does have many celebrations and parties, there is a lot more to the meaning behind them. To begin, Pride is meant to create safety and community for individuals, including providing the environment to be safe. Pride also acknowledges the progress that has been made over time with rights and acceptance, while also acknowledging that there is still a long way to go. Finally, this is also significant as it demonstrates to 2SLGBTQ+ youth and those who may not be out yet that they are not alone, and it can show them what their life could be, which is especially significant given the amount of queer individuals who find themselves grieving over the life they may not believe that they can have. AIDS crisis. Taking place in the late 1970s and early 1880s, the AIDS crisis was a virus that existed globally, then found itself in the United States. It began being labeled as a gay disease, as it was queer men who were mainly impacted by HIV and the resulting acquired immune deficiency syndrome. The government failed to act on the virus, mainly due to the fact that HIV and AIDS was mainly impacting queer men, intravenous drug users, immigrants, and BIPOC communities. Due to the inaction of government and the refusal of service from health professionals, queer men were taken care of by lesbians who provided medical care. As well, lesbians played a large role in activism during this time. In fact, this is the reason why the acronym was changed from GLBT to LGBT at the time, in order to show appreciation for the efforts of lesbians in their care and activism. Eventually, activists, medical professionals, and other individuals discussed their diagnoses regardless of the stigma, eventually resulting in government action and the prevalence of the virus decreased. WHO and the 2SLGBTQ+ community. The World Health Organization has a history of stigmatizing the 2SLGBTQ+ community. In 1977, labeled as homosexuality, experiencing same-gender attraction was noted as a disease. It was not until 1990 that this was removed from the list which categorized it as a disease. While sexual orientations different than heterosexuality were not seen as a disease, trans identities were still stigmatized. This led to a history of trans individuals requiring documentation for gender-affirming health care, where they would get interrogated and questioned to see if they were considered trans enough. This harmful approach led to stigmatization and discrimination, as did the classification of same-gender attraction as a mental illness. Due to this, there is a connection between queer identities and mental health, as queer individuals face consistent discrimination and harassment rooted in homophobia and/or transphobia. More on mental health in the 2SLGBTQ+ community will be discussed in another presentation. BIPOC erasure. Throughout history, and even currently, BIPOC individuals find themselves erased from community discussions, regardless of the fact that BIPOC trans individuals and drag queens played a major role in the progress that has been made towards 2SLGBTQ+ rights. For instance, during the Stonewall Riots, BIPOC individuals were found on the front lines, similar to many other social movements made for the 2SLGBTQ+ community. Within the media, documentation of the riots, and among the community, these roles are not as discussed, erasing the efforts of those who lived at the intersections. Despite their role, however, there are still large discrepancies in the rights for BIPOC 2SLGBTQ+ individuals. This can be seen in the large difference in poverty rates among queer men and BIPOC queer men. Events like these depict how BIPOC individuals have been both erased from history and how this has impacted them through an intersectional lens. While progress has been made and Canada is one of the more accepting countries for 2SLGBTQ+ individuals, there are still many different issues the community faces. This section will cover current issues specifically discussing discrimination, hate crimes, conversion therapy, difficulties accessing gender-affirming healthcare, and issues facing 2SLGBTQ+ youth. It is important to note that this list does not encompass all issues, especially when issues are looked at through an intersectional lens. Discrimination. While progress has been made and Canada is one of the more accepting countries for 2SLGBTQ+ individuals, there are still experiences of discrimination. Examples of this can be seen through how media censors queer content, regardless of how this has been challenged. In some criminal cases, queer individuals' advances have been taken as more threatening, when they do not actually threaten an individual. This has been used as a way to provide shorter sentences for individuals who attack queer individuals. Additionally, individuals still discriminate and spread homophobia and transphobia, regardless of the harm. An example of this is hate crimes against 2SLGBTQ+ individuals, which are still widespread. Hate crimes. As discussed, hate crimes are a demonstration of discrimination that impacts the 2SLGBTQ+ community. Statistics demonstrate that in recent years, hate crimes against the community are growing. Canadian statistics show that in 2019, there were 263 incidents reported, which shows a 41% increase within a year and the highest number of incidents reported since 2009. Over half of these hate crimes reported were violent in nature. Conversion therapy. Conversion therapy is a practice that aims to alter an individual's sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. This can include talk and behavioral therapies or medical treatments, which have been disproven to have any legitimate effect by the United Nations among various other groups. Conversion therapy causes severe harms to individuals and can result in mental health issues among other concerns due to the false belief that sexual orientation and gender identity can or should be cured. Approximately 10% of 2SLGBTQ+ individuals in Canada have experienced conversion therapy, where 72% of these individuals were under 20 years old. While it is still a practice in many countries, in 2021 the Canadian government has pushed legislation to ban the practice. This is the third time that this practice has been aimed to be banned within the country. The banning of this practice in Canada demonstrates progress and hope to many individuals that this practice will be challenged in other places as well. Another issue facing, in particular, trans individuals is the difficulties in accessing gender-affirming healthcare. While there have been calls for all gender-affirming healthcare to be covered, such as voice training or facial feminization surgery, currently in Canada only hormone replacement therapy, or HRT, and bottom surgery can be covered. Due to the belief that many of these procedures can be included in aesthetic care, they may not be covered. Long wait lists, the need to pay for healthcare themselves, and a large amount of paperwork poses increased issues in accessibility. This often leads to individuals relying on other trans individuals for referrals. In fact, individuals in Quebec often face issues with wait lists as they require evaluation from a psychiatrist or clinical psychologist to apply for HRT. However, this issue continues to be advocated for, as gender-affirming healthcare is healthcare that should be made easily accessible to trans individuals. Issues facing 2SLGBTQ+ youth. 2SLGBTQ+ youth experience several problems due to how others may respond to their sexual orientation or gender identity, and this can include those who are questioning. In one 2021 survey, it was discovered that 35,000 2SLGBTQ+ youth, or 75%, experience discrimination at least once in their lifetime. This includes experiences of physical and emotional bias or violence, and rejection by schools, employment, or their communities. It is argued that due to these experiences and the stress that come from it, 2SLGBTQ+ youth are at a heightened risk for negative health outcomes, and are also at a higher risk to experience suicide, homelessness, and use illegal substances. This can also worsen mental health, resulting in anxiety, depression, and feelings of isolation. Those who express gender that differ from societal norms for their perceived sex or gender are at a heightened risk for physical, psychological, and sexual abuse. Additionally, they can be at risk for school victimization. While there are repeated experiences of discrimination, homophobia, and transphobia that have resulted in negative experiences both in the past and currently, it is also important to discuss the resilience that exists within the 2SLGBTQ+ community and how they resist in the face of oppression. This section will cover 2SLGBTQ+ resilience and resistance, and 2SLGBTQ+ youth resilience and resistance. 2SLGBTQ+ resilience and resistance. 2SLGBTQ+ individuals show resilience daily, especially as existing in a world where one goes against the norms is an act of resistance itself. Resilience is a key aspect of taking pride within one's identity and can be significant to thrive as a queer individual. As such, resilience is a constantly changing process, one queer individuals consistently work towards. However, building a community has shown to have its benefits. Additionally, this is seen through the concept of chosen family. Queer individuals can face discrimination or be disowned by their own family for their identities. Due to this, chosen family has been a significant factor in ensuring resilience and having support. Finally, self-validation is another method that 2SLGBTQ+ individuals use. Self-validation can be important when identities are consistently invalidated or someone is told they are going through a phase. While these misconceptions are not true, they can negatively impact individuals. However, that self-reminder that one is valid, as is their identity, is an important step in resilience. 2SLGBTQ+ youth resilience and resistance. 2SLGBTQ+ youth face various factors that put them at heightened risk for discrimination and can make them more vulnerable. Regardless, there are some evident ways that queer youth have and continue to show resilience every day. Some examples include creating their own communities through becoming friends with other queer individuals and school-based programs for 2SLGBTQ+ youth. As well, they focus on having pride in their identities. Some do this through coming out, which can sometimes also be a method of reclaiming terms used against them. Many youth push through bullying and social exclusion to show their resilience. And finally, through resistance, youth show their continued resilience. Resistance is seen through the act of daily living for them, as well as challenging dominant beliefs and disrupting systems of oppression through advocacy. For an immediate mental health crisis, call a local crisis line for support. For non-immediate mental health supports, a useful resource is For a Safer Space. For a Safer Space is a nonprofit that offers accessible and inclusive mental health care. Visit the website for more information if you would like to reach out for support. To conclude this video, we'll go over some key takeaways. Colonization has had a negative impact on beliefs regarding the 2SLGBTQ+ community, as cultures that once embraced various sexual orientations and gender identities often had homophobic and transphobic beliefs in force. The Stonewall Riots were a key moment where queer individuals decided to resist against police violence. It became a significant movement that helped to push towards progress, and it began the Pride Month celebration. The AIDS crisis was another event that demonstrated homophobia. As queer men were mainly impacted, it led to government inaction. Queer identities were once considered a disease. While this has been disproven, the stigma it created remains. Additionally, BIPOC individuals often face erasure throughout history and in current efforts, regardless of how they are often negatively impacted. While progress has been made, current issues of discrimination and hate crimes impact the community. Conversion therapy harms queer individuals in a variety of ways and is a dangerous practice. As of 2021, a bill has been passed that would ban the use of conversion therapy in Canada. Trans individuals also face difficulties accessing gender-affirming health care for several reasons. However, advocates are pushing for the recognition that health care is a right and gender-affirming health care is health care. Youth can be vulnerable to different experiences of discrimination and issues faced, which can derive from how those in their life respond to their identities. However, this can pose issues as youth are dependent on families and their communities at that age. Regardless of oppression and discrimination, 2SLGBTQ+ individuals have shown great resilience and resistance, continuing to pave the way towards furthering human rights. That concludes this presentation on 2SLGBTQ+ history, current issues, and resistance. Thank you for watching.